Happy day students. Today we are going to read about democratic politics, working of institution, class 9 social science. We are going to start off the lesson by understanding what is meant by a government order, how is a major policy decision taken. Government of India appointed a commission in 1979 headed by B.P. Mandal called Second Backward Commission. Commission gave a report in 1980. One of the suggestions was to reserve 27% of government jobs for socially and economically backward classes, which abbreviation of which is SEBC. This issue was discussed for many years. Janata Dal won elections in 1989. VP Singh, the Prime Minister, decided to implement this reservation. The President announced it in his address to the Parliament. On 6th August 1990, the Cabinet decided to implement and the Prime Minister announced in both the houses of the Parliament. The senior officers drafted an order signed by an officer and it became the memorandum issued on 13th August 1990. There was a heated debate on the issue and it was finally taken to Supreme Court. The case was known as Indira Shawne and others versus Union of India case. In 1992, Supreme Court declared the Mandal order as valid but asked for some modifications to be made in this government order. Now let us see, if any decision is taken, who are the decision makers? What are the institutions that are involved in this decision process? Such a major decision could have involved the President, who is the head of the state and the highest formal authority in India. The Prime Minister, the head of the government, takes most of the decisions in the cabinet meetings. Parliament, consisting of President and the two houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. The Prime Minister must have the support of a majority of Lok Sabha members to pass a memorandum. When the office memorandum was passed in India, there was a heated debate. Some felt that this was unfair as it would deny equality of opportunity to those who did not belong to backward communities, while others felt that this would give a fair opportunity to those communities who so far had not adequately been represented in government employment. This dispute was finally resolved by the Supreme Court of India by hearing all the cases. This case was known as the Indira Shawne and others versus Union of Indian case. The Supreme Court judges in 1992 declared that this order of the Government of India was valid. The dispute came to an end and this policy has been followed since then. Need for political institutions. The government is responsible for ensuring security to the citizens and providing facilities for education and health to all. It collects taxes and spends the money thus raised on administration, defense and developmental programs. It formulates and implements several welfare schemes. Hence, we require political institutions. The Prime Minister and the Cabinet are institutions that take all important policy decisions. The civil servants working together are responsible for taking steps to implement the minister's decision. Supreme Court is an institution where disputes between citizens and the government are finally settled. Now, types of political institutions. There are 5 types of political institutions in India: the President, the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers, the Parliament, the Judiciary and the Civil Service. Let us go on with the Parliament. Decisions are not directly taken in Parliament, but parliamentary decisions on the reports influence and shape the decisions of government. These decisions bring pressure on the government to act. If Parliament is not in favor of decision, then the government cannot go ahead and cannot implement the decision. In all democracies, an assembly of elected representatives exercise supreme political authority on behalf of people. At national level, it is Parliament and at state level, it is Legislative Assembly. In India, Parliament consists of 2 houses, the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. Rajya Sabha, the Council of States, and Lok Sabha, the House of People. The President of India is a part of Parliament. Although he or she is not a member of either house, all laws made in the house come into force only after receiving assent of the President. Indian Constitution does give Rajya Sabha some special powers over the states, but on most matters, the Lok Sabha exercises supreme power. Here are some points that illustrate this. Any ordinary law needs to be passed by both the houses. But there is a difference between 2 houses. The final decision is taken in a joint. If there is a difference between 2 houses, then the final decision is taken in a joint session in which members of both the houses sit together. The view of Lok Sabha is likely to prevail in such a meeting since there are a lot of members of Lok Sabha. Lok Sabha exercises more power in money matters. Lok Sabha controls the Council of Ministers. This is the picture of the Parliament, the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. Let us see political executives. At different levels of any government, functionaries take day-to-day decisions but do not exercise supreme power on behalf of people. All these functionaries are collectively known as the executive. This executive is in charge of execution of policies of the government. When we talk about the government, we usually mean the executive. Political and permanent executives. In a democratic countries, two categories make up the executive. One that is elected by the people for a specific period and is called the political executive, who can take big decisions. In this category, they take the bigger decisions. People who are appointed on a long term basis are called the permanent executives or civil servants or civil service people. People working in civil services are called civil servants. They remain in the office even when the ruling party changes. Why is a minister more powerful than the civil servant? In a democracy, the will of people is supreme. The minister is an elected representative of people and thus empowered to exercise the will of people on their behalf. Minister is finally answerable to the people for all the consequences of his or her decision. That is why the minister takes all the final decision. The minister is not expected to be an expert in the matter of the ministry. Prime Minister. The President appoints the leader of the majority party or the coalition of parties that commands a majority in the Lok Sabha as Prime Minister. In case no single party or alliance gets a majority, the President appoints the person most likely to secure majority support. Prime Minister does not have a fixed tenure. He continues in power as long as he remains the leader of the majority party coalition. After the appointment of the Prime Minister, the President appoints other ministers on the advice of Prime Minister, which are usually from the majority party or the coalition. The Council of Ministers again is the official name for the body that includes all the ministers. It usually has 60 to 80 ministers at different ranks, like the cabinet ministers, ministers of state with independent charge, and ministers of state, who are the junior ministers who are assigned to assist cabinet ministers, and the ministers of state with independent charge. Here we see some of the powers of the Prime Minister as well as the President. As the head of the government, the Prime Minister has wide-ranging powers. Like the Prime Minister chairs the cabinet meeting, he coordinates the works of different departments. His decisions are final. He exercises general supervision of different ministries. All ministers work under him. He distributes and redistributes work. He has the power to dismiss ministers. When he quits, the entire ministry quits. Now let us move on to the President. The President is the head of the state. The President supervises the overall functioning of all the political institutions in India so that they operate in harmony. Elections of President. President is not elected directly by people. A candidate standing for President's vote has to get a majority of votes from members of Parliament and the members of legislative assemblies to win the election. Here are some of the images of some of the presidents of India along with the powers. All governmental activities take place in the name of President. All laws and major policy decisions of government are issued in the name of President. All major appointments are made in the name of President. All international treaties and agreements are made in the name of President. The President is the supreme commander of the defense forces of India. The President exercises all these powers only on the advice of Council of Ministers. The President can only appoint the Prime Minister by his or her own will. The Judiciary. All courts at different levels in the country put together are called the Judiciary. The Indian Judiciary consists of Supreme Court, High Court, District Courts and Court at local level. The courts solve cases between citizens of the countries, between citizen and the government, between two or more state governments, between government at the union and state level. These are the picture of the Supreme Court. Independence of the judiciary means that it is not under the control of the legislature or the executive. The judges do not act on the direction of the government or according to the wishes of the party. The judges of Supreme Court and the High Court are appointed by the President on the advice of Prime Minister and in consultation with Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Once a person is appointed as Judge of Supreme Court or the High Court, it is nearly impossible to remove him or her from the position. A judge can be removed only by an impeachment motion passed separately by two-thirds members of the two houses of Parliament. Let us move on to powers of judiciary. The judiciary in India is one of the most powerful in India. The Supreme Court and the High Court have the power to interpret the Constitution. They can determine the constitutional validity of any legislation or action of the executive in the country when it is challenged before them. This is called judicial review. The Supreme Court of India has also ruled the core of basic principles of Constitution cannot be changed by Parliament. The powers and the independence of Indian judiciary allow it to act as guardian of the fundamental rights. Anyone can approach the court of public interest is heard by actions of the government. This is called public interest litigation. So with public interest litigation, we come to the end of the chapter. Read the content that is given in the textbook. Thank you.